Hey guys, Bradley Hallman here. Welcome back to my bass cave. We're going to do another in-depth series. If you guys didn't see the last one, it was over deep cranks. We're in the heat of the summer, and I'm just going over different techniques specifically to summertime to help you guys catch more bass. Today we're going to talk about brush pile fishing. I'm going to cover all aspects of it. There's a lot of things that go into it depending on the water clarity, the depths of the brush piles. We're going to go over lures, rods, reels, line size, and different techniques that I use all across the country to catch fish out of brush piles. Brush pile fishing is not just specific to certain parts of the country. Even my guys in Florida are ate up with brush pile fishing. In the summertime out there, there's not any even wood out there. They have to man make it, they drag it out there, drop it, or a hurricane blows it in there. But brush pile fishing is big from coast to coast, all different types of waters for all different types of fisheries. There's lots of different techniques, lures, styles of ways to fish them, and we're going to cover all those today. All right guys, let's go over all the intricacies, different lures and techniques that I use to fish brush piles all across the country. All these baits and lures that we talk about here in this video, I got the links down below in the description. You guys go down and click those. They go straight to Tackle Warehouse. If there's anything here that I didn't cover, drop a comment below. I'll be glad to answer. I enjoy all the comments and everything that I get on this channel, and I appreciate you guys watching along. The brush pile fishing, dude, is like one of my very favorite things to do in the whole entire world. Especially here in Oklahoma, I enjoy it. I enjoy it everywhere that I go. Summertime, it is the best way that I've caught some of the biggest bags in the summertime. For me personally, brush pile fishing seems to be the #1 common attractor. We're going to start at the big end of the spectrum. So I'm going to kind of go through some of these lures that I use to break down and approach brush piles, and I'm going to start with kind of the same order that I use in fishing them, right? So when I first pull up to a brush pile, what's the first thing I'm going to throw into it? One of the first things that I throw a lot of times is a spinnerbait. I've got a 3/4 ounce War Eagle in this hand, a 1/2 ounce War Eagle in this hand. Both of them have willow leaf blades on them. Depending on the depth of the brush pile is going to depend on what size I'm going to throw. If they're anywhere from tops of them are 10 foot or less, I'm probably going to throw a 1/2 ounce. If they get deeper than 10, then I'm probably going to throw the 3/4. Throwing both of these on 20-pound test fluorocarbon. Bow positioning is really critical on this. I like for the brush pile to be about in the middle of my cast. So if I make a long cast with this 3/4 ounce spinnerbait, I want to let it sink all the way to the bottom at the end of the cast. And I'm going to twitch my rod, start reeling, and bring this thing so that the blades are spinning, and bring it towards the brush pile. As it starts to reach the brush pile, the line's going to be up over top and cause this thing to start climbing. Anytime I bump a limb or anything like that, I may give it a little twitch and let it fall to try to get a reaction strike out of them. This is a bait that these fish are normally not seeing in brush piles. Spinnerbait is something guys think about throwing on the bank around flooded bushes and things like that. This can be a game changer out there, and it gets quality bites. That's what I like about it. Some of the biggest fish in that pile are likely to eat this. One of the other main reasons I like the spinnerbait is that it's got about a 99% chance of coming through clean. So on my first cast, or second cast, third cast, I don't want to get hung up, spook everything in there. This is a really good bait to throw right off the bat. The second lure that I'm probably going to go to is going to be a DD22. I like to call it crashing a crankbait. I throw this on 20-pound test line, guys. So I've got it on big line to be able to get those fish out of the heavy cover. I crash this thing, and what I mean by that is I'm using it usually on a 7-to-1 gear ratio, a pretty high-speed gear ratio. Same boat positioning. I like the brush pile to be about halfway in my cast. I'm going to smoke this thing up to that brush pile, and I'm going to knock the crap out of it with this thing. It is amazing how weedless this DD22 is. This is not something I can do with any other crankbait. It seems to be this DD22. I did some videos on deep cranks on my last video. If you guys didn't see it on my in-depth series, go back and check it out. There's more than just wood to this crankbait right here. It's pretty special. But yeah, this is a great big fish catcher. Really get some reaction strikes out of some big fish, and it's the way I like to attack brush piles in the summertime. If I've gone through that rotation, then I'm going to come to something that you've seen more often than not. I'm going to go to the big worm. This is a B2 worm by Big Bite. The thing that I'm doing a little bit different, which a lot of you guys are probably already doing, is that I am pretty much doing 99% of my brush pile fishing these days on any type of plastic with the wobble head. Just like you guys, I sit and watched a guy win the Forest Wood Cup a few years ago over on Lake Ouachita in Arkansas with a wobble head. I was interested. I came home. I was amazed at the rate that they eat this thing. I had a buddy of mine in the boat with me, and we were out at Lake Thunderbird throwing in brush piles that I'm very familiar with, and this bait would get 5 to 6 bites to 1 on his Texas rig. I don't know what it is about the wobble head, allows more action to the worm. The other thing that surprised me was how weedless it was. I mean, it really comes through the brush good without getting hung up and comes through clean, which is really important to me because I don't want to spook some fish out of some of my quality brush piles. But this BT worm is a go-getter. This is the same worm as the old monster made by Zoom. They're the exact same worm. It's something about the tail action in this worm. I don't know what it is in the summertime, but it is definitely a bite getter. When I can get away with a little bit bigger worm, or I want a little bit bigger profile, I'm crazy about this worm. This is the Zoom old monster, but in the mag size, and you can see them side by side, how much bigger it is, fatter. It's a much larger profile. If I'm on a lake that I feel like it's not getting a lot of pressure or has big fish and they want a big profile, I really do like this worm. I've had a lot of success with it. As far as colors, generally for me, I keep it pretty simple. I love the plums, I love the blue flecks, and the black and blues. Every now and then I go to a green pumpkin, but generally I'm in one of these purple hues in the summertime, and usually something with these ribbon tails. I like the ribbon tails. Speaking of the ribbon tails, it gets me right to the brush hog. This is a standby. It's a big profile. It also has a ribbon tail in the summertime, which makes it very effective. It's a bait that I've used and caught a lot of fish on, and many things besides just brush piles, but there's something about a brush hog, and I don't know what it is they eat. Also, the 8-inch finesse worm. This is a big bite 8-inch finesse worm. Anything that's got a straight tail. I've noticed that there's some lakes, different impoundments, different times of the year where they don't want any action at all. This is a really good one. I'm throwing all of these baits, every one of them, even the brush hog, all on a wobble head now. This particular wobble head is made by Big Bite. It's a 3/8. It comes with a Gamakatsu EWG style hook on it, which is the hook that I like. We've got them in all different sizes. I'm generally throwing it in 3/8. I would say that I do probably 90% of my brush pile fishing with the 3/8 wobble head. I go up to a half if it gets over, I would say, 15 feet. So anytime I'm fishing 15 to 25, something like that, that's when I would probably go to the 1/2 ounce on this big worm. But I throw the wobble head on all those things all across the board. One of the things that I got laying here is the pocket knocker, and Big Bite actually started packaging these, and I've been crazy about them. This is something I've used my entire career. This is a money saver, whether you're throwing crankbaits, swim baits, or a worm or a jig. This is what I call a pocket knocker because I just carry it around in my pocket. It stays in there. It ends up on my nightstand at night. In the mornings when I get up, I just pick it back up, it goes back in my pocket with my keys. I've carried this one around a long time, as you can tell. This thing has a little clip on it, just like what you'd put on a crankbait. You clip it onto your line. You want to be vertically over the top of a hung lure. I say hung, you boys up north call it snagged, but a lure that's snagged or hung up in a brush pile or on a rock or a ledge, crankbait, whatever. You just clip this thing on your line, let it go all the way down, just let go of it, let it slide down your line, and just put slack. And if you're patient, sometimes it may take 4 or 5 minutes of shaking to get it loose, but if you're patient, guys, you will get back an extreme number. I mean, 9 out of 10 is not right. I mean, it would be 29 out of 30. You will get 29 out of 30 of your baits back. About the only time I don't get baits back when using this pocket knocker is if I'm hung up in some type of trot line or fishing line where there's a ball of line down there, or I'm in some type of carpet or something like that. Anytime I'm hung on just rock or wood and it's a hook, if I'm patient and I just keep shaking this over top of it, I get my lures back. This thing will save you guys a ton of money. This is a really cool deal that I've carried around a long time that can help you guys out a lot. I said that there was some techniques and things that were different that we're using. We fished a tournament on Sam Rayburn last summer, BASS Open, and Castledine and I both spent a lot of time out on the brush piles, and this tournament was dominated out of the brush piles, the top 10. We spent a lot of time out there early on in practice going through a lot of the techniques and things that I've just shown you guys, and really didn't have a lot of success. The thing that those guys were doing that was different, those guys were drop shotting. They were taking this robo worm on a drop shot on 10-pound test line on a lake that's got 10 pounders on it, and they were catching them, giants. They would throw the drop shot out there in a brush pile just like you would throw your 10-inch worm on 20-pound test line, bring it up to a limb and let that weight hang on that limb and just sit and shake it, and those big fish were coming up and grabbing that bait. I asked a couple of my buddies that finished in the top 10 in the event, first question on my mind was, well, what size line are you using? They're like, well, I'm using 10. One guy said 12. I said, are you losing fish? And they both told me stories of these, 8, 9 pounders that bite it, go underneath the limb, and they're out there jumping, and they break them off, and there's nothing they can do about it. But they told me, they said, Hallman, look, you know, you got to get them on before you get them out. And I totally got that reasoning, because I'm a dock fisherman, and when I'm fishing docks, it's a lot of the same thing. I'm putting my bait in a lot of places a lot of guys don't put it. But I don't land every fish because of some of the places I put them. But some of the fish I do land, and you do have to get them on before you get them out. This is going on not only in Rayburn, I've seen this down in Florida, any of the places that are high pressure. Those fish were out there all along, and we just didn't find them because those fish had seen so many 10-inch worms and so many crankbaits that they didn't react. The drop shot on light line was a huge difference maker. I also noticed that even at Thunderbird, you guys that live here in Oklahoma that watch my videos know that the history of Thunderbird is it's dirty bird. It's a mud hole. And I sit out there last summer or summer before last, and we won 2 or 3 Wednesday nighters in a row off of a place, all of them on a drop shot. I mean, we caught multiple 7-pounders on a freaking little bitty worm. It was incredible. It was a place that has always held big fish. I'd gone through with some of the bigger profile stuff and hadn't gotten any bites. Threw that out there and instantly started getting bit. This thing can really be a game changer. It's something a lot of guys aren't talking about, and I want to throw it out there to you guys because that drop shot is special. Here is another thing that is very unique. This is a hollow belly. This is a 5-inch. I believe this one's a zoom. It's got lots of teeth marks on it because it's been eaten very well. It's got a 1/2-ounce head on the top of it. This is a game changer as well in the brush piles. This is something they don't see very often. What allows me to fish this open hook in the brush piles is my live scope. With the invention of live scope that Garmin's got out and the things that I can see the brush pile, I can see my bait, and I can float it either right over the top of that brush pile, and I mean literally inches. I can see it come right over the top to create a reaction strike, or I can come down the side. A lot of this brush piles fishing has to do with water clarity as far as where the fish position. And that's where this thing right here comes in. I'm going to explain kind of the best way I know how. If you were in a room with a brush pile and you had a light sitting over on the other side of the room, if I turn the light off and it's dark, the only way you're going to know that brush pile is there is to get right next to it. That's the same thing a fish relates to a brush pile in muddy water. But if I turn that light on, that allows you to sit in the shadow of the brush pile but be further away from it in that same room. You can see the brush pile, you're in the shadow because the light's on the other side of it, and you can sit further away from that brush pile. And that's exactly what happens in brush piles and clearer water impoundments. So as the water clears, the further that fish can be away from that brush pile but still relate to it. That's where this thing comes in, and our 10-inch worms and all these things you're throwing right into the brush piles and you're not getting bit. It's because a lot of times the fish aren't even in that brush pile. They're off to the side of it. This bait right here with live scope, I can throw it, get right on the shadow side. All I gotta do is look at where my body's standing, where the sun is related, where my shadow is, get on that same side of the brush pile and make that cast 5, 6, 10, maybe even 20 feet away from that pile, and float that thing through that shadow of that pile, and this thing right here will get you bit. Hollow belly is a cool bait with an open hook to catch fish that are related to brush piles in the summertime. That's about all that I have to cover as far as lures and techniques. These are the primary baits that I use all across the country. We'll get right into the lines and stuff that I use as well. We'll go over some of that, cover that, but it's pretty basic, the rods and the line, the reels and all that kind of stuff. So this is my main breakdown on brush piles. If you guys got any comments below, you got any advice on something else I could throw or try on a brush pile, it's basically a rotation for me, guys, right? I'm not pulling up to a pile and just throwing my 10-inch worm out there, and if I don't get bit, firing up and going to the next one. I'm basically going through a rotation of baits, different looks to try to get one of them to bite. And a lot of times if I can get one to bite, I can get 2 or 3 to bite if it's a really good pile. So hope this part helps you guys out. Let's get into the fishing line. All right, we're gonna go over the lines. Guys, like I say, if you're enjoying my in-depth series, I am trying to go in-depth on certain techniques that are kind of involved with the time of year that we're in. And right now we're in the heat of the summer. And so we're going over brush piles. If there's something that I've left out that you guys would like to know about, or something you see I'm missing out of this video, or the one that I did previously on deep crankbaits, please go down below in the comments, let me know. I appreciate all the feedback that I get. It's how I work to make this channel better. All right, so let's get straight into line. Let's go right to the drop shot that we were talking about. Primarily, it's going to be 10 and 12 pound test line, fluorocarbon. You guys can buy any type of line you want. This happens to be Sunline shooter. This is what I use. It's abrasive resistant. There's a lot of good fluorocarbons out there. Doesn't really matter as long as you're buying a nice quality fluorocarbon. There's some out there that are not as quality shooter, and Sunline to me has always been my favorite since I started using it years ago. And it's a company that I work with, so that's what I've got here to work in this video for you guys. As we move up and we get into the swim baits, the 10-inch worms, especially the mags, any of that, it's all going to be 20-pound test or 22-pound test shooter for me. I'm not even going to throw 20. I'm going to throw 22. I'm usually not worried about line size with a big bait, even with the swim bait. I may go down to 20 just to throw my DD22. That's primarily what I'm going to throw that crankbait on. But those are the lines that I'm going to be throwing. Reels, as long as they're, you know, big spooled reels that I can make long casts with, gear ratio to me is primarily going to be a 7-to-1. I don't think I'm going to want anything slower or faster. 7-to-1 gear ratio reels primarily across the board for any type of brush pile fishing that I'm fishing. The only thing that I might say is I might throw a 6-4-to-1 on the swim bait to give it a little bit different, slower action, a little bit easier to reel slower, but you could get away with a 7-to-1 too. That's just all personal preference. If you're a guy that you feel like you can slow down on your rear handle, then use a 7-to-1, which is what I do. Or if you're a guy that really feels like that slower gear ratio just kind of helps you naturally slow down without having to put the involvement of the thought process into it, then use a 6-4-to-1. I do like the higher speed because me personally, I feel like it helps me catch up to a fish on a hook set. Those are pretty much the reel speeds that I use. That's the line that I use. The rods that I'm generally using on all my big worms and stuff, we'll get to those. I'll grab some of those and we'll cut those in the video right now. All right guys, there's two different rods that I'm going to primarily use whenever I'm throwing big worms. One is going to be the Falcon Amistad. It's the rod that you guys have heard me talk about nonstop for the last 3 years, and it's basically because I use this rod for so many different things, and I've said that over and over, and I mean it. I throw this bait a lot, this 10-inch worm, and I throw it on Amistad. There is another rod that I like in the Expert series. You can get the Amistad in the Lowrider or in the Expert series. The Expert's a little bit more expensive. I've got the links down below. The Amistad Extra Heavy is a rod that I really like with fluorocarbon because it is a little bit stiffer rod. They're both 7'3". The Extra Heavy is 7'4", but they're basically the same size rod. It's just that this Extra Heavy is 1 power heavier, higher in rod, so it's a little bit stiffer. I like that with fluorocarbon. There's not a lot of stretch, and it seems to be the rod of my favorite choice day in, day out in brush pile fishing. So if I'm throwing this big monster or anything like that, or a 10-inch worm, I'm probably throwing it on this Amistad Extra Heavy by Falcon in the Expert series. The spinning rod, I didn't even pull one out of my boat. I've got it down there somewhere, but the spinning rod is a 7-foot shaky head rod by Falcon Lowrider. There's some 7'3" out there that are really nice rods as well. Spinning rod is whatever you mainly throw your drop shot on will work just fine in the brush pile, so don't try to change anything there. One thing that I do different on my spinning rod that we didn't talk about earlier is on the line. I'm using braid, which a lot of you guys are, on your spinning reels just to allow for knots and things like that, line twist that you get from fluorocarbon. So most of you guys are using braid with a leader. Whenever I'm brush pile fishing, I'm really going to shorten up that leader. So instead of having it that 4, 5, 6 foot long leader that we would normally have, I'm going to run braid down. I may only have a 2-foot leader in brush piles now. So I've got less line and less chance of that 10 foot of line being in that brush pile. Remember where I was telling the story about the 8-pounder out there jumping that's got your line underneath the limb. If I've got a very short leader, chances are that's my braid that's on that tree, and I've got a lot better chance of landing that fish than if I'm using a really long leader and I've got fluorocarbon 10-pound test on that limb. So this is 18-pound test plasma. Comes in a really high vis bright green. This is what I'm using day in, day out in brush pile fishing. And like I say, keep your leader short so you got more braid, because when that fish comes up there and you're just sitting there holding it, he's not seeing that 2 foot up the line that you've got some braid there. You know, what he's looking at is right there at the bait, right where the hook's at. So got fluorocarbon there. It's still a finesse presentation, but shorten up your leaders. It'll help you guys a lot get some fish out of those brush piles. Guys, I put a lot into this channel. I mean, a whole lot into this channel. Please leave comments below if I left anything out that you can think of. That's how I use this feedback to try to make this channel better. If it's your first time here, bump that like, hit the subscribe. And until next time, guys, I'm out of here.